Hi everyone, welcome back to this channel. So normally I make videos about languages. I thought for once I would make something a bit different and tell you about how I made a game in Unity without any experience at all. So I like to play chess in my free time. It's just a hobby I have. Just something I'm interested in. I like to watch famous players play. I like to watch famous games of famous players. Sometimes I do chess puzzles on chess.com and things like this. And when you do a chess puzzle, you have to do things like, so you have to look for, are there any hanging pieces? Meaning, are there pieces not defended by other pieces? What checks are there in the position? Like attacking kings. What pins are there in this position? And I thought it was a bit tedious going through all this, drawing arrows myself. And I was wondering, isn't there like a tool I could make, like some kind of, I don't know, website you can use that will show you these things automatically without having to, do it yourself? And I looked it up and there wasn't such a tool. So I thought, why don't I try and make that myself? And that's what started this whole journey. So I studied programming at college, but I didn't really get too far with it and didn't really learn too much. I studied using Visual Basic, which is a Microsoft-based language, but I didn't really learn it too well, didn't really learn too much, and didn't continue it afterwards. That was maybe, I don't know, maybe 10 years ago, not sure. I think at first I tried to make it in Visual Studio, then I realized it's just like the tools aren't really there for Visual Studio. It's mostly used for, like, I don't know, some simple form-based programs. So then I found something called Unity, and Unity is probably the most popular free software you can use to make games yourself. Unity, the main language, is a language called C#, which I hadn't actually heard of before this, which is kind of embarrassing, but so you have to learn C# to do this, and I didn't really know what I was doing. I tried to look up some tutorials of how to make a chess game using Unity, but I didn't really like most of them. So I ended up doing basically everything myself. And you think, where the hell do I start? How do I do this? What the hell am I doing? Now, of course, with experience, I can do this and I actually understand, but you kind of have to work it out yourself. I think at first I used terrible techniques, didn't know what I was doing. I kind of got it to work, and I used like really bad coding techniques, which now when I look back at it, I just think, God, it looks terrible. So first you start with just a regular 2D scene in Unity, and you have to add things. So what you want to add, you want to add a chessboard, you want to add chess squares. So what you do is you add a square to the scene. Of course you can manually place the squares if you want, but it's probably best not to do this. What you want to do is you create what's called a prefab, and a prefab is basically a template of an object. You can add scripts to them, which is just like some programming code, or you can add like lots of components to all of them. But we create a prefab of the square, and then we need to create a script that's going to control where to spawn the whole board. So what you can simply do is we need to spawn 64 squares for a chessboard. We need to create a loop of 64, and we need to spawn these objects in the right position. So to get the right position, first of all you set a starting position. So say you want the top left corner, right? We want this position here. And then we want to loop through 64 times and do like this. Like this, like this. So what I'd probably do is I'd do X by Y. So I'd first do a loop X by Y. All a loop does is it simply does the same thing over and over again. So say you want to do something 8 times, you'd create a loop like this. Is like for I, it creates a variable called I, makes it 0, does something, makes it 1, does something, makes it 2, until it gets to 8 and then stops. Then if you put 2 of them in a row, like 2 of them inside each other, it would do this and then it will do this. So it would be like, say for example, the first number will be 0, then it would go 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. So it's like coordinates for both. So what you got to do is you have like a variable for the X position and the variable for the Y position. You increment them as you need. So if you want to have a square here, 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 like this, all the way around, the way from the camera, but so you'd increase the Y if you're going from left to right. So you'd say you know the size of the square, say plus 100 or whatever, however size the square is, and then you can spawn the board. So you spawn the board like this, so that will go like that. And then you got to increase the X on the next one, and then like that. You normally want to reset the Y though, because if you keep adding to the Y, it will just go off the screen. So you reset the Y to back where it was, and then you go through it again, and then you can spawn the board. So that's how you spawn the board. You also want to save these locations, because you're going to use the locations of the squares also to spawn the pieces. Now first of all, I basically just used like there are these stock images for pieces that you can use, like on Lichess for example. They have like this basic chess set you can use. I believe that's copywritten. I don't think you can use it in a game you can sell. So I had to make my own. I had to make my own pieces, which took a long time. I was really terrible at drawing. I'm not very good at this. But eventually, I got them pretty good, and I think the earlier designs look absolutely terrible, honestly. But I got them looking really good, actually, at the end. I don't know, maybe they're okay, I don't know. So I made my own chess pieces. How do you spawn the chess pieces? So you need a way of representing the board. And what computers understand is numbers. So what you do is you create what's called an array. So an array is basically a group of variables. And a variable is just saved data. So it could be like, say for example, you create int number equals 10. This saves data with 10 as the value, right? You create 64 of these in a block. So you have this number, this number, this number, this number. This will represent the chessboard. And what you do is you can create an enum or a constant in. So you basically say if you want the value of a pawn to be 1. So I'm going to make the value of the pawn to be 1 or 0 or anything. It doesn't matter what you make it, as long as you keep the number constant. So say for example I'm going to say constant int white pawn equals 0. So that means if I'm going through in the array, if it's 0, that means it's a white pawn. And then you just go through with all these pieces. So what it would look like in computer language, it would look something like this, with the numbers like representing the piece. And then what you need to do is you need to look through this and say, in this array, if this is the value for a white pawn, you need to spawn a white pawn image at that location. That's basically how this works. It's not too complicated actually. If you think about it, you just got to get used to things like this. So you've saved the location because you did that before when you spawned the squares. So you just get the location of the index and then spawn a piece there. So moving a piece is a lot more complicated than this, because moving a piece you've got to find the piece on the square you're on, and then have it follow the mouse. Which is a bit more complicated. I think at first I had a terrible solution when I first did this. What I did was I basically had an object follow the mouse and shoot a laser, like it's called a ray. You shoot a ray, and that will intersect with the square, and that will select the square. And then what you can do is you add a script to it, so it will, for this square, say if you're on this square, it will be this index of the square, and that's referring to this location and all these things. That's basically how you do it. What I did now was simply just because what I did was I made the game, stopped doing it for like 6 months, and then came back to it and think, what the hell is all this? This is all broken. What the hell? I couldn't remember what anything did, so I just made everything again from scratch by copying most of the code over, and that took me about 2 or 3 weeks to do that.
Alright, so I thought I'd show you what my original game looked like. So I had this introduction screen. You press any button to continue. It basically looks like this. You start game, and then it loads the game, new pieces. You can select like an engine here, and then play against the engine. This is how my game looked originally. Also the tools worked. It doesn't look that good, to be honest, but here's what it looks like in the updated version. Alright, so here is the updated version. I took away the introductory screen and I made the menu just look better. When I hit play, you have this menu, just looks a lot better. You can select AI here, and then it goes to play, and then loads the board, and it just looks a lot cleaner. Just looks better in general.
But it's so much easier when you build from a solid foundation instead of not doing that. So I basically had to rebuild it again. When I did it again, what I did was I used on square enter. So on mouse enter this square, then you set the, and instead of using something follow the mouse and send array, and that's just, yeah, this is unnecessarily difficult when you could just, when the mouse enters, on mouse enter, it's a lot easier to do that. Alright, so when you get things working, when you get things following the mouse, then you've got to generate legal moves, which kind of annoying actually to do this. So you have to go through each piece, then you have to go, say if it's a pawn, you have to give it the pawn move. So the pawn moves, so you have the coordinates. Say for example the pawn would be here on this square, whatever number it would be. The pawn coordinates would be -8 or -8. So you've got to work this out, and then you've got to generate all the legal moves. Then you've got to account for checks and all these things. Of course, I did all this, did all the legal moves, get it working. Then I've got to have it show the moves. So you basically go into GIMP, you create these images that will show the moves, and you have it show those moves based on the coordinates, based on that. So it's a bit complicated. It takes a bit of practice, but you can do it eventually. Then I had to work on the tools. So the tools I decided to create were things like showing attacking pieces. So if you're attacking a piece and it's not defended, it should go red. If you're attacking a piece and it's defended equally, it should go yellow. If you're attacking a defended piece, a well-defended piece, then it should go green. That's basically the concept, which isn't too difficult, but basically you have to like find all the legal moves or find all the possible moves they can make in the next turn and see if they're attacking a piece, and then go through all the defending pieces, see if they're defending any pieces, and then count the number. And you got to do things like, is it defended by a queen rather than a knight? So if it's defended, things like this. The value of the piece also matters, and stuff like that. Then there was things like contested squares, are like squares that two pieces attack, or an enemy and an say for example a square is attacked twice, like once by you and once by your opponent. If you move a square there, then you lose that piece, because it's like you're defending the square but then you move, so you're not defending it and it takes. It's like things like this. Then there's stuff like checks, so when you can attack the king, or pins. I used a red circle, relative pins I used an orange circle. This quite complicated code, but basically I'm just looking through all the moves and looking to see, say for example, is there a king here, is there a piece there, is there a bishop there? I'm just doing this, I'm just looping through the moves. That actually is the easy part, because I thought, well, I'm making a game, like why would someone want to play this? They're just going to play for tools, like they'd buy this just for tools. But I thought maybe I could add some famous games from some players, and maybe you can guess their move. So I started adding some games from Mikhail Tal, one of my favorite chess players, because he was so aggressive. So I added a few games of him, and I added some, and I just thought, why don't I add more games? Why don't I add so I had like a part of the game, and I thought, why don't I add the whole game? I could just add the whole game, why not? Then I thought, maybe I could add more games, so I could keep adding. I just kept adding more games, and the way I did this at the start was terrible, because there's a good way to code and there's a bad way to code. Normally the best way to code things like this is functions, so you don't want to repeat the same line of code over and over again. I can show you a good example of this with spawning pieces. So the way I spawned pieces before was terrible. You're supposed to use functions. Use functions, you're not repeating yourself then. So I'll show you a good way to do that and a bad way to do that now.
Okay, so here I'll show you a terrible code example. So I just have the exact same before. I just want to print the board. So if it's a white pawn, I want to show white pawn. If it's a white knight, I show white knight. To do this, I've done a load of ifs and else ifs, which is the terrible thing to do. Because look, just what am I doing here? I mean, also in Unity, it'll be a lot longer if you're spawning something. It'll be really long. Terrible. This works, but it's terrible. Here's a good example. So here's the good example. So what I've done is I've created basically an array of chars, which is just a letter. One for representing the first letter, then the second letter, and these will basically correspond to white pawn is 0, so this is white pawn. 1 will be white knight, and that's how I've done it. And I replaced all of those else ifs with just one line of code. And it does the exact same thing.
So yeah, so when I was making these, so I called it find the move. I was doing it terribly at first, but basically I had to go through all the game with an engine, check the moves, see what move you played, if it was best, and then code the logic so that if you play the right move, it's right. If you play the wrong move, it's wrong. Go back, and then show different variations. I have to have a thing where you can load a position into the game, and then have it show text and go through like the logic. It's basically like a quest system, kind of. All it really is just, so you have a list of instructions. So it could be something like, maybe I give it doesn't matter what you give it really, just any, say for example you give it 0, and that's show some text. So 0 is a command, show text. Maybe 1 is play a move. Maybe 2 is load the thing where you have to play a move, and it's basically just a list of instructions. So it could be something like, I don't know, load a position. It's just a list of instructions. So load a position, show some text, play some moves, show some text. It's just a list of those in a row, and then I have to actually write what the text is. At first I did this terribly, and now I just use functions, and it's a lot better now. But this just kept snowballing. So I ended up adding Bobby Fischer's games, the chess grandmaster from America, who kind of went insane, but still was an amazing chess player. Then Garry Kasparov, and then Karpov games. So I added 4, and I added 20 games of each. That's like 80 games. I had to go through 80 games, import them into the game. At first I would actually manually put the moves in, but that's a terrible thing to do. Later I add a thing where you could import a PGN. So a PGN is basically the format of the game. Like, it shows the coordinates, what moves were played. You could just import that into the game, and then I could have it code itself. That's just basically how you do it. So the way I would write it, the function, I would just put that whenever you made a move. So I would just put that in the game, and it would just print literally everything out for me. So I don't have to sit there for like 30 minutes copying all the moves.
So here I'll show you how I do this. So here, for example, I have just one line of code that will actually write out the code for me every time I make a move. So I have this every time I add a move to like a quest. I have this line of code, and it has the starting square and the ending square. So every time I import a PGN, so I'll go over to my game and import a PGN. Alright, so back in my game I have this load PGN function in the analysis board. So I basically copied a game on the internet, paste it here, and then hit paste. I've got an invalid move somehow, don't know how. Anyway, but if you look here in the console, it prints out all of the moves from the game, and I can just literally copy this into the code, and I've written it for them. It's written it for me. I don't have to sit there copying out all the moves.
Which you learn this with experience, right? You learn this with experience. That's not all though, because, well, I thought, it's kind of a bit difficult for the average person to play. Maybe if you're a beginner to chess, like, guess what Kasparov played in this position? Like, you're a beginner, how the hell are you supposed to do this? So I thought maybe I could have something more for beginners. So I thought, oh, I could add some tutorials, right? So I added tutorials, and then I kept adding more tutorials, and I kept adding more tutorials. And tutorials work in exactly the same way, really. It's just you showing a position, showing some text, showing a position, showing some text. But I ended up adding like over 60 tutorials about like endgame, middle game, openings, tactics, finding checkmate positions, and stuff like this. Then I thought I should add an analysis board, which was honestly, coding an analysis board is probably the most complicated thing I've ever tried to code, because basically an analysis board is where you have, say, you have like a game, so you can import a game or something like this. You can go to one move and then, oh, let's play this move, let's play that move, let's play this move, let's play that move. So you could like branch into like, and how do I do this in the UI? It's like really, really complicated to do all this. And it's probably full of bugs still, the way I've done it. But it kind of works, and I can delete moves, I can go through all the moves in it. And the tools work. The tools work in previous positions. So yeah, it's pretty complicated doing all this. And that's not all, though, because I can't just have you play yourself. You're supposed to play yourself, so I need an AI. I need to make an AI. How do I do this? How do I make an AI? So I tried making a basic AI, and it was kind of bad, and it was really slow, and it wasn't good enough. So yeah, so I made an engine that's relatively good. It destroys me. I have no chance against it. It's still not as good as, like, a regular engine. I think I still need to improve it later, which I probably will do at some point. But that's not all. then I decided, because I'm crazy, to add variants. So I really like this new variant on chess.com called Duck Chess. So I thought, oh, let's add Duck Chess, just so I can, you know, I don't know, please Eric Rosen or something. I don't know. But adding Duck Chess is like, it's not that complicated, but you have to add like new rules and avoid, like, pins don't exist. You have to have a completely different algorithm for generating moves. It's actually a lot simpler, to be honest, because you don't add in regular chess you can't make a move that doesn't avoid check. Say if your king is attacked, you have to block it or move the king. You can't just leave it. Duck Chess, you leave it and just block it with the duck. You don't need to. It's a very weird variant, to be honest. And that's not all. Well, recently I added a game review and the ability to add a custom engine. So say if you don't want to use my engine because you think it's terrible or something, which it probably is, I don't know, you can add a custom engine if you want. So you can just add a URL, add a custom engine, and then use that. You can also, I did a game review, so you can review the game. That will show you a graph of the score at the end, and you can also use a custom engine for that. And you can use a custom engine in the analysis to review what you should play, what the best moves are, see the score, and see an eval bar at the bottom. So I added most functionality that exists in most things. So this in a nutshell is basically how I made a game. This took me like 2 years. I did take like a 6-month break in a while, and I had no idea what I was doing, and I didn't know what C# is, but now I don't know, I'm quite good at programming, I guess. I don't know. I guess you kind of have to be to make one of these games. So Chess Tools is available on Steam. I'll probably post something when I've released it. It'll be like in the next month or so. I'll release it sometime. Hope you find this interesting. A bit different than normal, but
just a small update. As of now, I've actually released Chess Tools, so it's actually available on Steam if you want to buy it.
anyway, I'll see you guys next time.